The passage this morning is from Mark chapter 4, beginning with verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in a boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
I got itchy eyes this morning. I'm sorry. I wanted to read that passage. I know we normally have a reader, my wife or somebody else, but there was just a couple of nuances in that passage that I want to emphasize. You'll understand as things get going. All right. I'm not sure why my massive, huge St. Bernard is afraid of thunderstorms. I don't get it at all. It is the weirdest thing ever. You know, we had thunderstorms last week, and Mr. Bear was all upset. This massive thing, I don't even know, is like totally crazy. First of all, let's start with the fact that he's never even seen lightning. Like, he doesn't even know what a thunderstorm is. Like, why are you afraid, dog? And I know you all have dogs, and you think it's so cute that your dog, you're shaking, but that doesn't happen in the Jordan home. That dog is massive. My wife is a little taller than me. We have a queen bed. We don't have room for another adult. And here he comes, tromping in. Bam! Right there, shaking and all like scared. We're hugging this big, massive dog. It's the weirdest thing. What is that about? He's never even seen lightning. He doesn't know what thunder is. Why are you so afraid? Well, the disciples were with Jesus on a boat. And apparently there were several boats with them that were all crossing this very small sort of lake area. And a storm breaks out, and the disciples are freaked out. They can't believe it. They're like, "What is going on?" And Jesus is asleep in the hull, like nothing's going on. And they're upset about that. Thing is, when I read this passage a couple times, usually I read it a couple times, kind of take some coffee in early in the week and say, what is going on here? The thing is, I read this passage and I'm picturing the boats, and I'm picturing the disciples, and I'm picturing Jesus asleep, and I'm picturing the storm and the water coming in and everything, and all of a sudden, my spidey sense kind of goes off like, wait a minute. Why are these guys afraid? They're fishermen. They do this for a living. They've been out on boats many times, probably with storms, I'm sure. And all of a sudden, there's this storm happening, and they're afraid. They want to go down and get the carpenter's son to hey, what's going on? You're just sleeping. What else would he be doing? It's bizarre. These are fishermen, experienced like sailors. What's happening in this text? I feel safe to say that I think there's something going on in this text that is more than just storms. I think that the disciples were afraid of something more. They were afraid of the whole thing. They were afraid of the whole journey with Jesus that they had gone on. The townspeople are opposing some of them. The religious leaders are like, wait a minute, you can't heal the guy with the withered hand on the Sabbath day. What are you doing? You're anti-God. You're saying you are God. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the disciples are like, whoa, are we on the right side? And all of a sudden they get caught in this big storm, and they might be thinking, hold on a second. Are this the forces of evil that are kind of coming against us? Are we perishing? Is this how we're going to die? Have we really chosen to be with the Son of God, and the evil one is going to take us down right here on this lake? It's definitely evident in the rest of the Gospels that this kind of thing sort of is their thought process. They see the forces of evil. They see the opposition. They get worried about it. It happens in the other parts of the gospel. Why not here? Maybe they really believed that they were perishing, that they were dying, that evil was going to win. Makes sense on why they would freak out. I have a question for you all. If the boat is kind of like the church, and it's sailing through these hostile waters that I'm picturing here, I look at this passage, and I see our situation today. Don't you? I see the world today. As a pastor, I have to tell you, I have a real complaint. It's hard for me to say out loud. You saw that little pause? I have a little bit of a complaint. Sometimes I feel like God is asleep at the wheel. Sometimes I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's not great, and it's kind of negative, and it's threatening, and it's bad, and God's not doing anything. Why isn't God doing something? Why is God asleep at the wheel? It's hard to be a Christian today in today's world. Don't you think? It's very difficult to be open about your faith. When it comes to our culture and our communities and their relationship to the Christian church, it's not peaceful. It's hostile. Why doesn't God do more? I want God to be visible now. I want God to show up now. Why can't God see what's going on and do something about it? Not only is the church experiencing hard times, but our culture and our society have really taken a turn, an ugly turn. We are in a storm right now that we can't see our way out of. And people are getting scared of the future. We need God to wake up and bring peace to all this tension and strife and anger. We need God to wake up. So we understand what the disciples were going through. We understand their frustration. We understand why they were frustrated with Jesus at the moment they were frustrated with him. It's not that they didn't have faith. They wanted God to act. That is faith. And Jesus was asleep as if nothing was going on and there was nothing to worry about. Faith? We have plenty of faith. We want you to act, God. We want God to fix it. We have faith. We know God can do it, but God doesn't do it. And that makes us worry if he's ever going to do it. This is kind of the mentality. Jesus says to the disciples, this is where it gets really good. Jesus says to the disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? I would say that the church has plenty of faith. But that wasn't the question. The question was, why are you so afraid? You act afraid like you haven't been through anything before. You act afraid as if God has never acted before. Another way of looking at it is, why aren't you confident in God? And I would ask, do storms serve a purpose? Do they? Do storms serve a purpose in our faith? If they didn't, God wouldn't allow them to happen. But maybe they do serve a purpose. Maybe our faith is the very faith that builds confidence. We hear about this storm at the beginning of Mark's gospel, but what about the second storm? What about the third storm? What about the fifth storm, the eighth storm, the 15th storm? We're only hearing about the first storm. What happens in the subsequent storms? The ones that happen after that? Do the disciples change? Do they become more confident? That's an interesting question. How do those storms affect the church? I'm fascinated by my girls. I always am. I use them too much in sermons. I already know that. Girls, just plug your ears. I'm sorry. But this is such a helpful illustration for this point in the subject. My girls watch a lot of TV, more than I would like. But the thing is, they'll watch movies. And they'll watch movies over and over and over and over. TV shows over and over and over and over. 1,000 times. Not 1,000 times, but you know what I mean. They can recite the lines. They know what's happening. There's no suspense. They know what's going on, right? They feel great about it, right? The raft is going off the waterfall cliff. They get saved. Don't worry, right? But you have them watch a movie they have not seen, and they are in stitches. They're under the covers like, oh no, what's going to happen? Oh no. My littlest one, she will walk out. She'll be like, I'm not watching this. This is too much suspense, right? Because she's not been through it before. She doesn't know what's going to happen. It's fearful. It's like, what's going to go on? When we've gone through things and we've gone through storms, and God has been a part of that and has invested in us and grown us out of these bad situations, we become stronger in our faith. So why did these guys fear? Why did they fear? Why did they have fear of the unknown? Why did they give it power? Fear of the unknown is very, very powerful. You know that from this last year. Fear of the unknown will cause us to lose our minds. We get all messed up over it. In the midst of storms, fear of the unknown can be just arresting. It can just seize our hearts and cause us to lose confidence. At first glance in this passage, it seems that the fear of the future zapped the disciples' confidence. And that's what I've thought for years. I've preached on this sermon many times, and I'm sorry that I didn't see what I saw this week. But there's something in the passage this week that just stood out at me, and that was really powerful. And that is, there's still fear throughout the whole passage. Fear happens in the beginning of the passage, but an even greater fear happens at the end of the passage. Did you see that? They were afraid of the storm, and then after Jesus calms the storm, they had great fear for God. Can I read it again? Let me read it again. Why are you so afraid? Have you no faith? Then they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" They went from fear to great fear. That's interesting. What is that about? The fear that the disciples had in the beginning was just misplaced fear. Instead of having great reverence for God, they were afraid of the creation, which is surely under the lordship of the Creator. They lost sight of that. Yet we will worry ourselves sick over what is going to happen next, somehow thinking that God is asleep at the wheel, that God has no plan, that we are aimlessly rudderless in this life. What if we acknowledged what God has said about us? What if we acknowledge that God has begun a good work in us and He is faithful to complete it? And His plan may take us through storms and all kinds of things that we don't like at the time, but for good reason. I mean, we are preaching about a storm that happened 2,000 years ago with the disciples. And they were so excited about what happened during that very trying and very scary period that 40 years later, they wrote it in the gospel as one of the stories to share because they knew how important it was. And you will have those stories too. You'll go through storms in your life. You will go through things in your life that you think, this is terrible. I will never get over this. I'll never get past this. And sure enough, the God who created all things will make peace and calm that storm. And you'll look back and go, see, why was I so afraid? That's what Jesus said to the disciples. Why were they so afraid? God is with me always. It's time to transfer our fear of the future to a healthy reverence, great fear of God. That's really what it is. We walk through this life and we think God's asleep at the wheel, so we're afraid of everything that's in front of us. But in actuality, the proper disposition of the Christian is to have great, healthy fear for God, reverence for what God can do, reverence for what God will do. And look at the rest of it and say, you know what? I put my faith in God. That's where my faith and focus lies. The rest of it, let it fall where it may. God is in charge. Look at the people who fear God. Look at them and ask yourself, what is their daily routine? Amen?